This video will be a continuation of the part 1 video for section 1.2, which I hope you've already watched. This is going to build on what you did in the last lesson. I'm going to give you two more problems. One will show you what you do when there's a negative number that's multiplied with the variable, and then the second one's going to be just what you do when the variable is divided by a number instead of multiplied. And again, we're going to be using the idea of inverse operations here. So you're going to use your rules of negative numbers and the idea that when you divide, you undo division by multiplication. So this actually is the same kind of problem, but what looks different about it? Well, first of all, the variable term comes after just that little constant 5 there. And second of all, you're going to have to work with some negatives here. So the first thing to look at is look at the 5 and ask yourself, is that a positive 5 or a negative 5? There's no sign there. So that's an invisible positive, so we know that is positive 5. On the variable, what we have to do is look at the sign just before it. So you're going to want to look at the term like just that. So remember that when you're looking at the sign of a term, it's always going to be on the left side of it. So that x is actually multiplied by a negative 3, if you think of it that way. So it's going to be much easier that way. Okay. So once we've done that, we're going to get rid of the 5 first, because the 5 is actually connected by addition. We could, if you find it easier to do this, you could rewrite it as that negative 3x first, and then plus 5 equals 10. Again, those will mean the same thing. The 5 is positive. You actually have 5. But that 3x is negative. It means you owe the 3x. So you can do it either way you want. So I'm going to first get rid of the 5. It's a plus 5. I'm adding it. So basically now I'm going to undo it by subtraction. And so that's now gone. And I'm left with a negative 3x. On the other side I have a positive 10 minus 5 is 5. Now we're going to be dividing by negatives. So it's still division either way. So we're going to divide this x by the negative 3, so that way these will all cancel out. Whatever we do to one side, we do to the other, which means it's going to be 5 divided by negative 3. So left side, just like we want, has that variable x isolated. Now look at the right side. It's a positive 5 divided by a negative 3. A positive divided by a negative is negative, so the answer will be negative. That's taken care of. Now 5 divided by 3. It doesn't go in evenly. So like before, we can write it as a mixed number or as a decimal. But there's going to be a problem writing it as a decimal, because as a decimal, this is going to be negative 1.6 bar on it. So you can do that, but it's going to be harder to work with in a double check, because you're going to have to go back and multiply that bar by a negative 3. And you really can't multiply bars by a number unless it's a 1. Easily, or there's some situations where you can, but in general it's going to be difficult. So because of that, I'm going to put this back as a mixed number and say it's negative 1 2/3. So now I'm going to do the double check. So I've got this 5 minus 3 parentheses. I'm going to put in that negative 1 2/3 the way it is, equals 10. So now, working it out, I've got to take care of this thing. So this is 5. Now, a negative times a negative becomes adding, plus. Negative times negative is positive. 3. Now we can actually go back to improper fractions if you want, or you could distribute it, but I'll also work this off to the side for you. So we've got this, this 3 times 5/3, and I've already taken care of the sign, so I've left that out. Remember that when you're multiplying a whole number times an improper fraction, you've got to put a 1 underneath it, because multiplying fractions you need numerators and denominators. If you think back to canceling, remember that those 3's cancel out, and you're left with a 5 and a 1, 5 over 1 rather. So 5 times 1, 5 over 1 is 5. So we're going to ask, well, is 5 plus 5 equal to 10? And again, as your first grade teacher taught you, yes, it is. So therefore, that is a correct solution. So now here's another one I'd like you to try on your own. You'll see I can't really write a fraction easily with this program, with this app. So think of that as x divided by 4 minus 3 equals negative 0.5. So work it out and then pause the video, work it out, and then resume it. So I wrote it just more as a fraction so that way you can see what's going to happen next. So we have division, dividing by 4, and we have subtracting by 3. So we're going to undo the subtracting first by adding 3. Whatever you do to one side, you do the other side. I'm going to put point 0 there just as to make sure the decimals line up. So now, on the left side, we got rid of the 3, and all that's left is x divided by 4. So it's much easier to work with. On the other side, we have negative 0.5 plus 3. So remember that you can always reverse those, and so I'll do this off to the side for you. You can think of that as a 3.0 minus a 0.5. And if you look at it, you'll see I'm keeping the signs the same, where the 3.0 is positive and the 0.5 is negative. So when you subtract that, you're going to get a 2.5. So we're set up like that. So now we have to undo the division, and we're going to multiply by 4. Now, when I do this, you could write it as an x4 underneath it, the way I'm doing the plus 3 above it, except then it gets confusing because you have x as a variable, x as a times sign. That gets kind of hard to follow. So the way I show that is I seal off both sides with parentheses like this. And then I'm going to undo that division by multiplication, so that's a times 4. Whatever you do to one side, do the other side. My eraser isn't working, so I can't get rid of that scratch work for you. Now, these are going to cross off, and then all I'm left with is the x, which is exactly what I wanted. And then on the right side, 2.5 times 4 gives you 10. So there's my solution, x equals 10. So now I'm going to do a quick double check using the original equation. I'm going to say 10 divided by 4 minus 3 equals negative 0.5. Well, I look back at the 10 divided by the 4, which is 2.5, and since my right side's decimals, I'm going to write the left side as a decimal, so that's going to be 2.5 minus 3. Wait a second, I only have 2.5 and I'm subtracting 3. I don't have enough. It's going to go negative, so therefore, in fact, it will go negative 0.5, and that's going to work out. So now that you've seen that, I want you to go back to Edmodo and work through the problems that are set up for this part of 1.2. Check your answers, ask any questions that you need to, and then after you're totally set on two-step equations, then you can go on to the second video for 1.2 of the multi-step equations, which will take you through what you do when you have like terms that you need to combine, and also what you do when there's something to distribute. But again, all those equations eventually, as you work them out after 1 or 2 steps, it's going to become a two-step equation. And so if you really understand this well, then once you get those multi-step equations down to 2 steps, you've got it made.